In the unforgiving heart of Montana's mountainous terrain, a man's legacy teetered on the edge of collapse. Harold Winters, a name uttered with respect and awe across 3 counties, had built his reputation on an almost mythical ability, the power to tame the wildest, most unruly horses that others wouldn't dare approach. He had grown into a legend, not just by mastering beasts, but by bending their wild spirits to his will. Yet now that legacy stood on shaky ground. And the reason? A defiant, flame-eyed Mustang named Dakota. For weeks Harold had tried every trick in his weathered book, every whisper, every move, every test of patience, and still Dakota remained untamed, fierce as the wind on the high plains. The frustration was mounting, pride slowly cracking beneath the weight of failure. Finally, with anger clouding his judgment and decades of pride fueling his stubborn resolve, Harold made a reckless declaration, a bold and dangerous bet that no man, no matter how skilled, could tame this magnificent and volatile creature. Clearwater Valley, a quiet, tight-knit ranching town, buzzed like a kicked hornet's nest. Bets were placed, whispers turned to gossip, and heads shook in disbelief. Some saw it as an old man's pride finally getting the best of him. Others saw a challenge worth rising to. But none, not one soul, could have foreseen what would unfold when a quiet, sorrow-stricken girl stepped onto Harold's ranch. Her name was Lily Palmer, just 10 years old, and carrying a sorrow far too heavy for her small shoulders. Just months before, Lily had lost both her parents in a devastating car accident that had shattered her world. She had barely spoken since. Behind her hollow gaze was a well of grief that ran deeper than most could imagine. And yet, something unspoken stirred the moment her eyes met Dakota's, the untamable Mustang that had bucked every cowboy clear across the dirt. Over the months that followed, what bloomed between the girl and the wild horse would become more than a story. It would become legend, one that would shake the very soul of Clearwater Valley. Back on the ranch, under the piercing Montana sky, the autumn air hung sharp with the scent of dust and old leather. The morning sun spilled golden light across the frost-dusted fields. Harold Winters, tall despite the hunch age had given him, tugged on his cracked leather gloves. At 68, his bones ached more than he let on, but his pride never allowed him to show it. Not today. Not in front of the ranchers who had gathered, half hoping to see the legend falter. "You think you can handle this one, old man?" Came the teasing call from Frank Dawson, leaning lazily on the corral fence, a crooked grin on his face. Laughter rippled behind him. But Harold said nothing. He had no need for words. His hands, scarred, calloused, hardened from decades in the saddle, spoke for him. He'd trained horses before most of these men were out of diapers. But this horse, this wild, fire-hearted stallion named Dakota, was like none he'd ever faced. Inside the corral, Dakota paced with the energy of a storm, muscles coiled beneath his dun coat, nostrils flaring, eyes flashing with warning. Harold had pulled him from the northern hills himself, separating him from the herd with the intention of breaking and training him. But Dakota had refused every command, every approach, every attempt at gentling. He was wild to his core. "Just needs to know who's boss," Harold muttered under his breath, more to himself than anyone else. Rope in hand, he stepped into the pen. The moment his boots hit the dust, Dakota's ears pinned back and his body tensed like a drawn bowstring. The crowd hushed. They could feel it, that electric line between man and beast, stretched tight and trembling. "Easy now," Harold said, voice low and calm, masking the storm within. "We've danced this dance before." But Dakota was no partner. With a snort and a powerful lunge, the Mustang feinted, then bolted to the far side of the corral in a blur of muscle and dust. Harold stumbled, nearly losing his footing. Laughter crackled from the fence line. "Maybe time to admit defeat, Winters," Frank taunted. "I'll give you a decent price, considering he's still unbroken." Harold's pride bristled like barbed wire. "He'll break," he growled. "They all do." For another hour, he fought to prove it. But with each trick, each move, Dakota grew more enraged, more unwilling. Finally, soaked in sweat and seething with frustration, Harold threw the rope into the dust. From the fence, Dr. James Wilson, the town's kind-eyed veterinarian, shook his head slowly. "Some spirits," he said quietly, "aren't meant to be broken." "Nonsense," Harold snapped, turning toward him with burning eyes. "He just needs more time." Frank stepped in again, more serious now. Time you don't have, Harold. Winter's breathing down your neck. Your methods don't work on this one. And that's when something deep within Harold, something bruised by age, solitude, and the weight of unspoken grief, snapped. "I'll bet my north pasture," he said suddenly, voice loud and steady, "that nobody, not one soul in this valley, can tame this horse before the spring festival. Not you, not anyone." A stunned silence fell. The north pasture was Harold's pride, rich grazing land with the best access to Silver Creek. Sheriff Tom Morgan stepped forward, his tone cautious. "That's 3 months away, Harold. You're gambling your best land." "I am," Harold said firmly, jaw clenched, "because I know nobody can do what I can't." Frank's eyes lit up. "You've got a deal. I'll match $5,000 against that pasture." Wilson frowned. "This isn't a game, Harold. That horse isn't a trophy. It's my horse, my land, my call," Harold snapped. "Any takers?" By sundown, news had swept the town like wildfire. The great Harold Winters had finally lost his mind. Betting prized land on a creature no one could tame. But few knew what truly drove him. Not just frustration, but sorrow. This winter would mark 5 years since he'd lost his beloved Margaret. 5 long, silent winters in an empty house echoing with memories. The pain had turned him bitter, and now it was turning reckless. That same day, on the outskirts of town, a beat-up station wagon pulled up in front of an old farmhouse. Martha Palmer parked, then turned to her granddaughter, Lily, who sat silently beside her, tracing foggy shapes on the window glass. Her small face was pale, eyes shadowed by grief. "We're here, sweetheart," Martha said gently. "This was your mom's childhood home. It's your home now, too." Lily gave a small nod, but said nothing. She hadn't spoken much since the accident. 3 months had passed, but sometimes it felt like Lily was still there on that rainy highway, lost in the wreckage where help had come too late. The farmhouse was modest, but full of warmth. Neighbours had kindly stocked the fridge and aired out the rooms. Martha led Lily inside, trying to fill the silence with soft words. "Your room's upstairs, first door on the right," she said, lifting the bags. "I painted it blue like your old one." "Thank you, Grandma," Lily whispered, the first words she'd spoken in hours. That night, Lily sat on the back porch, knees hugged to her chest, staring at the mountains that stood like giants in the distance. Martha joined her quietly. "I saw a rabbit," Lily murmured. "Under the porch. It had white feet." "Your mom used to feed the wild rabbits when she was your age," Martha said with a smile. "Drove your grandpa crazy." Lily gave a tiny smile, a flicker of light in the dark. The next day brought pancakes and quiet conversation. And then a question, soft, unexpected. "Are there horses nearby?" Martha's heart leapt, the first sign of curiosity. "There are. Several ranches. Your mother loved horses, you know. Took lessons when she was just your age." "She did?" Lily looked up, something shining behind her tired eyes. "She did," Martha nodded. "Maybe once we're settled you could take some lessons too." Lily didn't argue. She simply nodded and took a small bite. Later, in town, Martha handled errands while Lily wandered toward a bulletin board outside the general store. Amidst the flyers, one caught her eye. A wild horse. A man's bet, a dare to the world. "Grandma," Lily asked softly on the drive home, "what's a Mustang?" Martha hesitated. "A wild horse, sweetheart. Why do you ask?" "No reason," Lily whispered, but in her heart something stirred. Something fierce and aching. Something that saw its reflection in the eyes of a horse no one could tame. For the first time since the accident, there was a spark in Lily's eyes, a real spark of interest. Martha had noticed it right away, that glimmer of life that had been missing for months. "Would that be all right?" she asked gently. "We truly don't want to intrude." "Not at all," Dr. Wilson assured her. "Harold may grumble about it. He's always been that way. But he respects your family. Your late husband, well, he helped Harold through a very dark chapter years ago. He hasn't forgotten." Later that same afternoon, the doctor's old truck rumbled down the winding, rutted dirt road toward Winter's ranch. Martha sat stiffly in the passenger seat, her nerves taut like fiddle strings, while Lily pressed her face eagerly to the window, her breath fogging up the glass as she watched the endless pastures roll by under the pale sun. "It's beautiful out here," Martha murmured, her voice caught somewhere between nostalgia and sorrow. She had forgotten how open the land felt, how vast and untamed it was. Harold's let a few things slide since Margaret died. Dr. Wilson replied, keeping one hand steady on the wheel. "But it's still one of the finest pieces of land in the whole valley." As they rounded a slow bend, the ranch house emerged, 2 stories of weathered timber and sturdy stone, crowned by a wide wraparound porch that had surely seen its share of hard conversations and quiet coffee mornings. Scattered outbuildings stood sentry across the land, and beyond them were fenced corrals and a large red barn nestled against the horizon. "Is that where Dakota is?" Lily asked suddenly, her small finger pointing toward the farthest enclosure, where a solitary figure paced, restless and alone. "That's him," Dr. Wilson said with a slow nod, "but it's best you keep your distance. He's unpredictable." As the truck crunched to a stop in the gravel, Harold Winters stepped out from the barn, wiping oil-stained hands on a rag shoved into his belt. His face creased into something between suspicion and wariness as his eyes landed on Martha and Lily. "Afternoon, Jim," he called out. "Didn't expect you to bring company." "Hope you don't mind," Dr. Wilson replied. "This is Martha Palmer. She's moved back to her family's place, and this is her granddaughter, Lily." Harold's expression faltered briefly as recognition dawned. "Palmer," he echoed, eyes narrowing. "Robert Palmer's widow?" Martha nodded solemnly. "Yes, it's been a long time." "Call me Harold," he said gruffly. "Robert was a good man. Sorry for your loss, even if it's been some years." "Thank you," Martha replied quietly. "We've had more recent losses too." She placed a gentle hand on Lily's shoulder. For a moment, something flickered in Harold's eyes, an unspoken understanding. There and gone. "You're here about the mayor?" Harold asked. "Yes," Dr. Wilson said, then hesitated. "But Lily, she's taken an interest in horses. She heard about your Mustang." At the mention, Harold's entire posture stiffened. "That animal's not for show. He's dangerous." "We understand," Martha began, but Lily stepped forward, her voice steady and soft. "I won't touch him. I just want to see him. Please." Harold stared at her, this small, fragile girl with hollow cheeks and eyes far too solemn for her age. There was something in her, some quiet defiance, that stirred a memory he couldn't place. "Fine," he said at last, "but you stay back from the fence. That horse has got a mean streak." With that, he turned and led them toward the corral. "Watch your step," he muttered. "This place ain't a playground." As they walked across the yard, Dr. Wilson leaned toward Martha. "I'll check the pregnant mare after you meet Dakota." Lily quickened her steps, eyes locked on the pacing Mustang. He was breathtaking, his dun coat shone under the afternoon sun, his muscles taut with suspicion, ears flicking constantly. "There he is," Harold muttered. 3 weeks I've tried. Saddle, bridle, calming tones, nothing. He nearly took my arm off on Tuesday." "Some horses aren't meant to be broken," Dr. Wilson said with a shake of his head. "All horses can be broken," Harold snapped. "I just haven't figured out his weakness yet." Lily stepped to the edge of the fence. Dakota snorted, pawing at the earth. Harold raised a warning finger. "Careful, girl." But Lily didn't move. She didn't reach out. She didn't speak. She simply stood there, body calm, eyes fixed on the horse. After a while, Harold grew restless. "Well, you've seen him," he said. "Jim, let's go check the mare." "I'll stay with her," Dr. Wilson offered, and Martha nodded, following Harold to the barn. Inside the stall, a chestnut mare lay breathing heavily, her swollen belly rising like a tide. "She hasn't been eating right," Harold muttered, his voice lower now, gentler. "First foal. Got me worried." As Dr. Wilson worked, Martha studied Harold. The stories about him were plenty, legendary even, but the man before her seemed weathered, not just by time, but by loneliness. His shoulders stooped under more than just age. That girl. Harold said suddenly, "She's not right." Martha tensed. "Excuse me? I mean, she's too quiet, her eyes, too serious." Martha hesitated, then sighed. "Her parents died 3 months ago. Car crash, drunk driver. They were on their way home from dinner." Harold fell silent, his gaze fixed on the mare. "Explains it," he said softly. "I've seen that look before." "She's always loved animals," Martha continued. "Before the accident, she was different, bright, full of questions. Now, animals are all that seem to reach her." Dr. Wilson returned. "The mare's fine, just needs a better diet. I'll bring some supplements tomorrow." He paused. "But you might want to come see this." Outside, Lily hadn't moved, but Dakota had. The Mustang now stood closer, 10 feet from the fence, head tilted, watching Lily. "Been like that for 15 minutes, Dr. Wilson whispered. "He usually charges if someone stares that long." Harold frowned. Probably just worn himself out. Or maybe, Dr. Wilson said, she's not trying to control him. That night, as Martha stirred a pot on the stove, she glanced at Lily at the table, sketching a horse in a notebook with surprising detail. "You liked meeting Dakota?" Without looking up, Lily nodded. "He's scared." "Scared?" Martha blinked. "He looked pretty fierce to me." "He doesn't know who to trust," Lily said. "Mr. Winters tries to make him do things too fast. They don't even know each other yet." Martha stared, struck by the quiet wisdom. What would work better? Time, Lily whispered. Just being there, not wanting anything. Later that night, Martha climbed into the attic and found an old photo album, dusty and worn. Inside, memories unfurled. Susan, her daughter at 12, beaming atop her first horse. At 16, holding a ribbon. Martha ran her fingers over the images. "She gets it from you," she whispered. "This gift, I hope it helps her heal." The next morning, Harold was at the door, hat in hand, visibly uncomfortable. "Mr. Winters?" "Harold," he corrected. "Been thinking about what the girl said, about Dakota being scared. Got me wondering, maybe she'd like to come back, just to watch. Nothing else." Martha narrowed her eyes. "This isn't about your bet, is it?" "No." Harold looked almost offended. "I've tried everything. Maybe a fresh pair of eyes sees something I don't." And so a new rhythm began. 3 times a week, Martha brought Lily to the ranch. While Martha helped the ranch hand Maria, Lily sat quietly by Dakota's corral. She didn't shout or gesture, she just watched. Harold hovered at first, convinced the Mustang would lash out, but slowly something shifted. Dakota remained tense when Harold neared, but with Lily he inched closer each day. "She just sits there," Harold grumbled. "Doesn't do anything. Sometimes whispers. I can't even hear her. What good is that?" "Maybe patience is her strength," Dr. Wilson replied. As golden leaves scattered across the ranch, Harold brought Lily a stack of horse books. "Educational," he muttered. "You used to ride in Seattle?" Lily nodded. "My mom taught me, said it was in our blood." Harold smiled faintly. "Susan had a chestnut with a white star. Used to ride by the creek." He paused. "You look like her." "Can I bring Dakota an apple tomorrow?" He frowned. "He's not a pet." "I know, it's not a trick, it's friendship." He hesitated, then nodded. "Toss it. No hands through the fence." The next day, Lily sat as always, apple cupped in her hands. Dakota approached slowly. She tossed it gently. The horse sniffed, hesitated, then ate. And he stayed. Harold watched from the barn, heart thudding. He heard her speaking softly. Though he couldn't hear the words, the tone reminded him of Margaret, gentling a nervous colt. "Well, I'll be damned," he breathed. That night he sat alone on his porch, whiskey in hand, memory thick around him. Margaret had once said, "You're so busy proving your boss, you forget to become their partner." He hadn't understood then. But maybe, just maybe, the child had remembered something he'd spent years forgetting. And come morning, he'd let her try something new with Dakota. Not for the bet, but because he believed in her. Because Margaret's voice, soft and stubborn, was alive again. In Lily. Without lifting her gaze, Lily's voice came low, tinged with quiet hurt. Is he really trying to take Dakota away? Harold let out a long, tired breath. The weight of years settled in his bones as he lowered himself onto an overturned bucket, his knees groaning in protest. "Frank's been eyeing that north pasture for as long as I can remember," he muttered. That bet just gave him a new excuse, a fresh angle. "You shouldn't have made that bet," Lily replied, her voice barely more than a whisper. A soft judgment, not angry, just sad. Harold gave a short, rueful laugh, the kind that came from a lifetime of learning the hard way. "You're probably right," he admitted after a pause, the words strange on his tongue. He wasn't used to saying things like that. Pride makes fools out of all of us eventually." From her jacket pocket, Lily pulled out a small carrot, the last one she had. She turned it slowly in her fingers, her voice thoughtful. "Mr. Winters, have you ever tried just sitting with Dakota? Not training him, not fixing him, just being there." Harold let out a sharp snort, the sound filled with the kind of disbelief that comes from old habits. "Girl, I've been working horses for 50 years. You don't gentle a Mustang by having a picnic." But Lily didn't flinch. Her voice softened, almost a whisper. "My mom used to say, animals know what's in your heart." The silence stretched between them like a taut rope. Then she added, more quietly still, "What's in yours when you're with Dakota?" The question landed like a pebble in a still pond, small, but the ripples spread wide. Harold opened his mouth, prepared to deflect with a snide remark or an old cowboy's cliché. But then he closed it again. He sat still, really still. The question burrowed into his chest, and for the first time in a long while he really asked himself. What was in his heart when he stood near that Mustang? Frustration, a familiar, bitter edge of it, pride. The kind that had pushed him to win, to never back down, determination. Of course, always that. But underneath it all, buried where he never looked too closely, fear. A creeping, gnawing fear that the thing he had done better than anything else in his life, breaking horses, was starting to slip away, that his time, his way, might be ending. Determination, he said aloud finally, settling on the safest answer. Determination to show him who's boss? Lily asked, tilting her head gently. Maybe that's the problem. She held out the carrot to him with both hands, offering it like a peace treaty. Want to try? Harold stared at the vegetable, then at the girl. Something in her eyes, quiet, unwavering, made it impossible to say no. He took the carrot with a grunt, feeling oddly out of place. I've fed horses before, you know. Yes, Lily said simply, but have you ever given one a gift without expecting anything in return? Harold walked toward the fence, slow, deliberate, Dakota's ears pinned back immediately, his whole frame tensed like a coiled spring. The Mustang stepped away, snorting in warning. He doesn't trust me, Harold said, glancing back at Lily. He doesn't know you, she corrected gently. Not yet. Try again, but this time don't look straight at him, and don't think about taking, think about giving. Harold felt ridiculous, but something inside him, a quiet thread of curiosity or maybe humility, told him to try, really try. So he turned sideways, avoiding direct eye contact, extended the carrot slowly and kept his eyes on the ground. The minutes ticked by, his arm began to ache. Still, he waited. Just as he was ready to give up, a soft snuffle reached his ears. Then, with incredible gentleness, Dakota took the carrot from his hand. Harold froze. He didn't breathe. The Mustang stayed nearby, cautious but present. That's a start, Lily said behind him, her voice carrying approval and hope in equal measure. Later that afternoon, as the sun began to lower in the sky and the air grew crisp, Martha's truck rolled up. She stepped out and glanced toward them. Harold cleared his throat. There's an old saddle in the tack room, he said gruffly, not meeting her eye. Used to be my wife's. Could use some cleaning. If the girl wants some pocket money. Martha raised an eyebrow. Are you offering Lily a job, Mr. Winters? Just chores, he replied quickly, shifting his weight. After school, if she wants, she's got a knack for horses, might as well teach her proper care. She starts school Monday, Martha replied, watching him. Let's see how that goes first. It's been hard, getting her to connect with other kids. Monday morning arrived, grey and sharp with nerves. Lily stood motionless at the entrance to Mountain View Elementary, her new backpack dragging down her narrow shoulders. Children swirled around her, shouting, laughing, weaving in and out like a sea she couldn't swim in. Martha gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. You'll be okay, sweetheart. Miss Wilson is very kind. Lily nodded, silent. Her eyes tracked the unfamiliar faces like a wary animal watching a new herd. I'll pick you up at 3, Martha said gently. And if the day goes well, maybe we'll visit the ranch. That thought gave Lily just enough strength to move. Her steps were small, reluctant, but forward. Inside, Miss Sarah Wilson welcomed her with warm eyes and an open smile. Class, this is Lily. She's just moved here. The children looked up, some with idle curiosity, others indifferent. A few offered hesitant smiles. A girl with 2 neat braids, Emma Cooper, patted the empty desk beside her. You can sit here if you want, she said brightly. My cousin lives in Seattle too. Is it really always raining? Lily eased into the seat, grateful for a question she could answer without opening her heart. Not always, she murmured, but a lot. The morning passed in a blur, new names, new routines, unfamiliar eyes. At lunch, she sat beside Emma, who talked enough for both of them. But at recess, the real test came. That's the horse girl, someone called. A boy, Jake Williams, lanky and loud, pointed at Lily. My dad says she's trying to tame Crazy Harold's wild Mustang. A crowd formed. Is it true? A girl asked. My mom said that horse nearly killed someone. He didn't, Lily said, her voice barely more than a breath. He was just scared. Jake rolled his eyes. Horses don't get scared. They're stupid. My dad says that Mustang should be shot before it kills someone. Something flickered behind Lily's eyes. Not fear this time, something sharper, stronger. "Dakota's not dumb," she said firmly. "He's smarter than most people. He knows who to trust." Jake laughed. "You named him? You're treating him like a pet. That's weird." "Mr. Winters named him," Lily shot back, cheeks flushed. "And I never said I could tame him. No one should try to tame him." "Then what are you even doing out there?" Jake sneered. "Playing horse whisperer?" Emma stepped forward. "Leave her alone, Jake." "She doesn't know anything," Jake snapped. "When that horse tramples her, don't say I didn't warn you." The bell ended the confrontation, but not the sting. By the time the final bell rang, Lily's shoulders sagged again. Her spark had dimmed. "Rough first day?" Martha asked as Lily climbed into the car. Lily nodded. "Can we still see Dakota?" "If you're up for it," Martha replied gently. "I want to. He's waiting for me." At the ranch, Dr. Wilson's truck was already parked beside the barn. Inside, he and Harold were checking on Dakota's healing leg. "He's recovering nicely," Dr. Wilson was saying. "Another week and—" He stopped when he saw them. "Good afternoon," Martha greeted. "Not interrupting at all," Dr. Wilson said warmly, especially to Lily. "Your friend's been much calmer lately. I think it's got something to do with your visits." Lily stepped toward Dakota's stall. The Mustang lifted his head, eyes brightening. He gave a soft nicker and stepped forward. Harold's eyebrows rose as Dakota lowered his head, allowing Lily to gently rub between his eyes. "He remembers me," she said, a soft joy in her voice. "Horses have long memories," Dr. Wilson nodded, "especially of kindness." Lily's hands stilled. "A boy at school said Dakota should be shot. Said he's dumb and dangerous." Silence fell. Harold's face darkened. "Roy Williams' kid," he muttered. "Figures." "Dakota's not dangerous," Lily said firmly. "Not if you don't scare him." Dr. Wilson nodded. "That's right. Most horses react out of fear or pain. Dakota's story isn't about aggression. It's about survival." Harold didn't argue. He just watched Lily and the horse. Dakota's eyes were half closed, at peace. "Mr. Winters," Lily asked quietly, "do you have any books about Mustangs? About where they come from?" Harold shook his head. "Never much liked reading about horses when I could be working with them." "I've got some," Dr. Wilson offered, "including a few from a woman who spent her life protecting wild herds." Lily nodded eagerly, her first real smile of the day breaking through. That evening, after they returned home, Martha dug through the attic. She emerged with a box labeled Susan, High School. Inside were 3 leather-bound journals. She brought them to the kitchen table where Lily sat, homework forgotten. "Found these," she said softly. "Your mother's notes, every horse she worked with, her thoughts, drawings, lessons." Lily opened the first journal reverently. On one page, a sketched horse's head with labelled ear positions. "She was really good, wasn't she?" Lily whispered. "One of the best," Martha replied, throat tight. "She had a scholarship to an equestrian college, but life took her somewhere else." Lily traced the handwriting, gentle as a prayer. Why did she stop? "She met your dad," Martha said, placing a hand on Lily's shoulder. "Moved to the city. Things changed. But she never stopped loving horses. That's why she made sure you had lessons early on." Lily looked up, eyes shining with new resolve. "I want to learn everything, for Dakota, and for me." Winter didn't just arrive. It stormed into Clearwater Valley with a ferocity that hadn't been seen in years. Overnight, a thick white silence blanketed the land, burying everything beneath nearly 3 feet of snow. Roads vanished under the weight, and the school district quickly announced closures that stretched into 2 full days. Snowplows fought a losing battle on the winding rural roads. For Lily, however, this unexpected pause in routine felt like a blessing from the sky itself. It gave her uninterrupted hours to spend with Dakota, the Mustang who had become her silent companion, and to pore through every word her mother had left behind in her journals. While the town huddled indoors against the blizzard, Harold Winters braved the knee-deep snow in the dark hours before dawn. Each step to the barn was a struggle, his breath steaming in the cold as he muttered his usual gripes about Montana winters growing worse with each passing year. Inside the barn, the horses greeted him with low whickers, their warm breath puffing into the chilled air like ghostly clouds. One by one, he checked their stalls with practiced hands. But when he reached Dakota's, he lingered. The Mustang stood quietly, watching him, not with fear or fire, but with something calmer, something that resembled interest. "Not so tough now, huh?" Harold said softly, his voice lacking the sarcasm it might have held weeks earlier. "Cold got you feeling social?" Dakota snorted, but not in defiance. It was just breath, just presence. Harold took a slow breath of his own, then reached into his coat pocket and pulled out an apple, meant for his own lunch. "Here," he offered gruffly, holding it out in his palm. "Don't get used to this." To his quiet surprise, Dakota approached, cautious but steady, and took the fruit from his hand. He didn't bolt or bare teeth. He simply retreated to his corner and began to eat. It wasn't a victory. It was progress. And Harold recognized that for the miracle it was. Later that morning, as Harold mended tack in the barn's relative warmth, Maria appeared with a mug of steaming coffee in hand. "The Palmer girl called," she said as she handed it to him. "Roads to their farm are still snowed in, but she wanted to check on Dakota." Harold nodded, accepting both the coffee and the girl's concern. "Tell her he's fine," he said, "eating well." Maria's eyes lingered on him with quiet amusement. "She's good for that horse," she added, "and maybe for you too." Harold bristled. "Don't know what you're getting at." She shrugged. "Since she started visiting, you've been different, smiling more, talking more. The animals notice. I notice." "Nonsense," Harold muttered, but the words lacked their usual bite. Maria wasn't done. "About that bet," she continued carefully. "Frank Dawson was at the general store yesterday. Said your North Pasture's as good as his. He's already making plans." Harold's jaw clenched. Frank's always counted his chickens before they hatched. "People are talking," Maria warned. "Some say the girl has what it takes. Others say you'll lose everything." "In Clearwater," Harold said, "everyone talks like they know everything. They don't." By the time the roads were finally cleared and school reopened, Lily had finished reading all 3 of her mother's journals. At breakfast, her eyes sparkled with a fire Martha hadn't seen in months. "I need to go inside Dakota's stall," she said casually as she spread jam on her toast. Martha blinked. "Absolutely not. That animal is dangerous. Mr. Winters hasn't been able to." "That's because he tries to control Dakota," Lily said firmly, her voice steady and new. "I don't want to control him. I just want to be with him." "Sweetheart." "Mom wrote about this," Lily interrupted, tapping the stack of journals beside her plate. "She called it threshold crossing. It's when the horse invites you into their space. It can't be forced. You wait for them to say yes." Martha stared at her granddaughter, stunned by the transformation. The quiet, broken girl had found her voice. "And you believe he's ready?" "I know he is," Lily replied. "He told me." That afternoon, Harold was shoveling snow from the paddock when Martha's station wagon pulled in. Lily emerged, bundled in layers, her arms hugging her mother's journals like armor. "Mr. Winters," she called, crunching across the snow. "I need to ask something important." Harold leaned on his shovel, eyeing her serious expression. "Must be urgent," interrupting chores. "I want to go inside Dakota's stall," she said bluntly. Harold stared. "Absolutely not. He's ready, and so am I." She held up a journal. "Mom wrote about this step. It's real." "Your mother wasn't working with a half-wild Mustang," Harold countered. "How do you know?" Lily shot back. "Did you ever read her journals?" The question landed like a punch. He hadn't. "She worked with a wild mare once, one that had been abused," Lily continued. She opened the journal to a marked page and handed it over. Harold read aloud. "Today Willow allowed me into her space, not by force or fear, but by choice. I waited outside her stall for hours, still and calm. When she invited me in, we breathed together. We became partners, not enemies." The memory of Susan Palmer as a passionate young girl flooded Harold's mind. Her stubbornness, her soft voice, her faith in horses as more than creatures to be broken. He'd dismissed her once. Now her daughter stood before him, just as sure, just as brave. "Dakota could hurt you without meaning to," Harold said, the edge gone from his voice. "He's powerful, unpredictable." "So am I," Lily answered, her eyes locked on his. From a distance, Martha and Maria watched, holding their breath. "She won't back down," Martha said. "She's her mother's daughter," Maria replied. "And she's right. That horse is ready." Reluctantly, Harold agreed, but on strict conditions. He would enter with her, lead rope in hand. Maria would guard the door. At the first sign of agitation, they would leave. As they prepared, Dr. Wilson pulled in. "Thought I'd check on the pregnant mare," he said, then paused, sensing the mood. "Everything okay?" Lily wants to enter Dakota's stall, Martha explained. Dr. Wilson's eyebrows rose. That's mind if I observe? Inside the barn, Dakota immediately sensed something was different. His ears twitched, nostrils flared, but there was no panic. Lily approached slowly, her voice a soft melody of reassurance. It's me, Dakota. Just me. But today is different. I'm asking you. Harold stood tense, rope ready. Dr. Wilson and Maria observed in reverent silence. Dakota retreated to the back of the stall, but he didn't pin his ears, didn't snort or strike. He was watching, listening. He's uncertain, Dr. Wilson whispered, but not afraid. Lily looked to Harold. I'm ready. Harold nodded grimly. Remember the rules. Maria opened the door just enough. Harold entered first, then Lily. They stood silently, letting the air settle. Minutes passed, tension hummed, and then, barely noticeable, Dakota exhaled, his body easing. One step, then another. He approached Lily slowly, ears forward. Don't move, Harold whispered. Dakota stretched his neck, breathing in her scent, her hands, her hair. Then, in a moment that seemed to suspend time itself, he lowered his head and touched it to her chest, a gesture of submission, of trust. Lily raised her hand and rested it on his neck. No fear, just connection. Dr. Wilson exhaled softly. Incredible. He's accepted her. She's one of his own. Martha's hand rose to her mouth, her eyes shining with tears. Susan would be so proud. Harold could only stare. 50 years of breaking horses, and he'd never seen anything like this. Dakota stepped back, calm and dignified. Lily bowed slightly and backed out, never turning her back. Once outside, her legs gave way, the moment finally crashing into her. Harold caught her. You did good, girl, he said softly. Real good. Dr. Wilson smiled. That was extraordinary. Very few people ever earn that kind of trust from a wild horse. I didn't do anything special, Lily said, catching her breath. I just listened. That's what made it special, Harold replied. Most folks never stop talking long enough to hear what a horse says. That evening, while snow began falling again, Frank Dawson received a phone call from a friend who'd witnessed it all. The Palmer girl entered the Mustang's stall today, the caller reported. He was like a lamb with her. Frank's jaw clenched. Harold let a child in with that animal? Didn't look reckless to me. Dr. Wilson was there, called it remarkable progress. Frank hung up and paced his luxurious living room, seething. That pasture meant everything. He grabbed his phone again and dialed. Sheriff, he said, Frank Dawson here. I've got some concerns about child safety out at Winter's Ranch. Back at the Palmer farmhouse, Martha sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by past-due bills and financial dread. Their savings had run dry faster than she expected, drained by moving costs and medical expenses. Spring planting was looming, and they weren't ready. The phone rang. Hello? Martha, it's James Wilson. Hope it's not too late. Not at all. Is something wrong? Not exactly, he said warmly. Just wanted to check on Lily. After what happened today, I imagine it meant a lot to her. It did, Martha said, smiling despite her worry. She's exhausted, but happier than I've seen her in months. I thought so. Listen, Sarah and I were talking. We could use some help at the clinic. Just 2 days a week after school. Paid, of course. That girl has a gift. Be a shame not to nurture it. Martha swallowed a wave of emotion. That's very generous. Not generosity, just good sense. After hanging up, Martha returned to her bills. They hadn't disappeared, but the weight of them felt a little lighter now. Maybe Clearwater really was the fresh start they needed. Emotionally, yes, but maybe practically too. The next morning brought more snow. Schools remained closed. Lily, disappointed at missing Dakota, lit up when Martha suggested they call Harold to check on him. To their surprise, he answered on the first ring. His voice, taut and serious, came through the receiver. Palmer residence. Good timing. As if recognizing an old friend, Dakota, the wild Mustang, let out a soft, almost questioning nicker. He responded to the gentle presence of Lily with a subtle shift in his stance, eyes fixed not on the new foal, but on her, like he was waiting for an explanation. It's a baby, Lily said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Star's baby. He's going to be okay. And as if those simple words carried some deeper resonance, Dakota seemed to understand. His tense muscles loosened, and his head tilted slightly, calm washing over him as he stood sentinel nearby. Those gathered in the barn stood in stunned silence, their disbelief mingling with awe. Never seen anything like it. Harold murmured to Dr. Wilson, eyes still locked on the surreal interaction unfolding before them. "They're talking," Dr. Wilson said with quiet conviction, "just not in a way we're meant to understand." He glanced toward Lily, but she does. As the group cleaned up after the birth, headlights suddenly pierced the barnyard darkness. Sheriff Morgan's patrol car rolled in, red and blue lights flashing through the snow-laced dusk. Harold frowned, drying his hands on a rag with an irritated grunt. "What now?" he muttered, heading out into the cold. Martha exchanged a glance with Dr. Wilson, unease shadowing her features, and followed him. Outside, the sheriff stepped out of his vehicle with a rigid unease, as though the cold wasn't the only thing making him uncomfortable. "Tom," Harold greeted him curtly. "We're a bit busy. Star just gave birth." "Congrats," the sheriff replied, though his tone lacked enthusiasm. "I need a word, Harold, in private." Harold's jaw tightened. "If this concerns my ranch, you can say it in front of them. Martha and the doc are helping." Sheriff Morgan sighed, his breath clouding in the icy air. "I got a complaint, Harold, about the Palmer girl being around that wild Mustang. Some folks are saying it's unsafe for a minor to be near an untamed animal like Dakota." The colour drained from Harold's face, his voice turning steely. "Frank Dawson, wasn't it?" The sheriff raised his hand slightly. "Didn't mention any names, but the concern is out there." "That's absurd," Martha interjected sharply. "Lily and Dakota have a bond. Dr. Wilson has seen it himself." The sheriff turned to the vet. "Is that true? Jim, you'd vouch for this?" Dr. Wilson nodded without hesitation. "What I've observed between those two is nothing short of remarkable. It's therapeutic. They help each other. There's no aggression from the Mustang, not toward her." That seemed to settle the sheriff's nerves just a bit. "That helps. Still, I have to file a report." "Well, while you're at it," Harold added with quiet heat, "you might want to note that Frank Dawson's been trespassing. Found boot prints near my north pasture yesterday." The sheriff lifted a brow. "Got proof it was him?" "His boots are custom-made, silver tips. No one else around here has anything like 'em." Their exchange was interrupted as Lily appeared in the barn doorway, framed by the warm light within. Her calm voice carried through the tense moment. "Mr. Winters? Star needs water, and I think Dakota deserves an apple for being so good." All eyes turned to her. This small girl, so composed, so confident, radiating quiet strength amid the adult turmoil. The sheriff's features softened as he looked at her. "You must be Lily. I've heard you're good with horses." Lily nodded solemnly. "They just need someone who listens. Most people never do." The simple truth in her words cut through the tension like sunlight piercing through storm clouds. The sheriff tipped his hat. "You're in good hands, Miss Palmer. I'll note that in my report." As he turned to leave, he added to Harold in a low voice, "Frank's pushing lines, Harold. Be careful. People are choosing sides." Once the sheriff drove off, Harold returned to the barn, a bucket of water for Star in one hand and an apple in the other. He found Lily sitting cross-legged outside Dakota's stall, scribbling in a small notebook. "What are you writing?" he asked, setting the water down. "Notes," Lily replied, not looking up. "Like my mom used to. I'm recording how Dakota acted during the foaling. I think he knew what was happening." Harold studied her for a long moment. "You remind me of her, always asking questions, always noticing things. Drove me crazy sometimes. She was always suggesting new ways to handle the horses." "You knew my mom?" Lily's eyes widened. Harold nodded, the lines on his face softening. "She worked summers here during high school. Best hand I ever had with tough horses. Until you, maybe." "Why didn't you tell me?" He shrugged awkwardly. Past is past. No sense stirring it up. But as they worked together to care for Star and her foal, Harold found himself sharing stories of Susan Palmer, how her quiet determination challenged his old-school ways, how she bonded with a rescue horse named Willow no one else could reach. To Lily, each story was a treasure, threads of connection to the mother she had lost. For the first time, Susan didn't feel like a memory. She felt like a legacy. That night, as another storm battered the windows, Harold sat alone in his kitchen, pen hovering over a letter he'd started and never finished. "Margaret," it began, as all his unsent letters did, "something remarkable happened today. A child showed me what you tried to teach me for 30 years, that patience outlives force and listening changes more than commands ever could. Maybe this old dog really can learn new tricks." He paused, then continued writing, his heart pouring out onto the page. About Lily, about Dakota, about how his long-held beliefs about horses, and maybe even life itself, had begun to shift. January brought with it bitter cold. Pipes froze, engines failed. Ranchers worked from dawn till dark to keep their animals alive. At Winter's ranch, Harold rose before the sun every morning, checking on Star and her foal, whom Lily had named Promise. Dakota, too, had changed. The once defensive Mustang had mellowed, his aggression replaced by a quiet, watchful calm. Harold still approached with care, but the hostility was gone. Each morning, Dakota would greet him with a soft nicker, not quite the eager response he gave Lily, but miles ahead of where they had started. Then came the morning when something felt off. Dakota stood oddly still, head low, breathing laboured. His hay untouched, water ignored. "Maria," Harold called urgently, "get Dr. Wilson, now. Something's wrong." Within the hour, the vet arrived, skidding up the icy driveway. After examining Dakota, his expression turned grave. "Looks like pneumonia," he said. "Not unusual in this kind of weather, especially for horses adapting from wild to domestic life." Harold felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. "Is it serious?" "It could go either way. We need to start antibiotics immediately. Keep him hydrated. Monitor his temperature." He paused. "Better call Lily. She'll want to be here." By afternoon, Lily burst into the barn, cheeks red from the cold, breath ragged from running. "Where is he? How bad is it?" Harold led her to the stall. Dakota stood weak and still, his bright eyes dulled with fever. "The next 48 hours are critical," he said quietly. Without hesitation, Lily stepped into the stall, laying a small hand on his neck. Dakota nudged her weakly. "He's scared," she whispered. "He doesn't understand what's happening." Harold watched her stroke the sick animal gently, speaking in hushed tones. "Dr. Wilson said someone should stay with him overnight," he offered. "Maria and I can take turns." "I'll stay too," Lily said, jaw set. "You've got school tomorrow," Harold reminded her. "I'm staying. He needs me." Later, when Martha arrived with Lily's overnight bag, she didn't argue. "Already called the school," she explained. "Family emergency." Harold raised an eyebrow. "You're letting her stay?" Martha sighed. "She hasn't asked for anything since the accident. Not for Christmas, not birthdays. But this matters." They set up a rotation. Martha in the evening, Harold at midnight, Maria before dawn. But Lily insisted on staying near Dakota every moment she could. That night, she read aloud from one of her mother's old journals, Dakota's breathing easing at the sound of her voice. "Mom once helped a sick horse too," she told Harold as he handed her hot cocoa. "She wrote that animals heal faster when they feel they have something to live for." "You've got your mother's soul," Harold murmured. As the night wore on, Dakota's fever surged. Dr. Wilson returned, administering more medicine, showing them how to apply cool compresses. "Keep talking to him," he told Lily. "Your voice soothes him." By dawn, the fever finally broke. Dakota drank from Lily's bucket, his eyes clearer. Dr. Wilson arrived for a morning check and smiled. "He's turned the corner. Not out of the woods, but the worst is over." Martha insisted on taking Lily home to rest. Before they left, Harold cleared his throat. "She saved that horse's life," he said. "Don't think he would have fought without her." Martha smiled. "It goes both ways. Dakota gave her something to fight for, too." After they left, Harold returned to Dakota's stall and sat down beside it. The Mustang met his gaze, calm and steady. "Don't know what kind of magic that girl's working on you," Harold murmured, "but I'm starting to think she's working it on me too." Dr. Wilson had entrusted them with months' worth of expert-level training. "That's months of work," Harold had said, hesitant. But Lily, her voice calm and sure, responded with quiet conviction. "We've got 6 weeks, and we've already done the hardest part. We earned his trust." Harold studied the young girl before him, hardly able to believe this was the same Lily who had first arrived at his ranch, quiet, withdrawn, her spirit dulled by grief and fear. Dakota's illness had changed her, or perhaps, more truthfully, it had awakened something in her. A new flame of purpose now burned behind her eyes, something steady and fierce. After a long pause, Harold gave a reluctant nod. "All right," he said slowly, "but we do this carefully, one step at a time, and your grandmother has the final say on anything even remotely dangerous." As January passed into February, a quiet rhythm began to form, a life shaped by small routines and growing hope. Every day after school, Lily split her hours between finishing her homework, helping with barn chores, and working through focused training sessions with Dakota. Harold often watched from a distance. At first he offered small suggestions, but as the weeks passed, he found himself increasingly stepping back, trusting Lily's instincts. Her connection with the Mustang was remarkable. Dakota now allowed himself to be haltered, led, and groomed. Not just by Harold, but by Lily too. More astonishing still, he was beginning to respond to her voice, to the subtle movements of her body, foundations of a style of training Harold had only read about, liberty work. And Lily, driven by her vision, was determined to demonstrate this at the spring festival. Word began to trickle through the town of Clearwater, whispers of the bond forming between the grieving girl from the city and the wild Mustang many had deemed untrainable. Opinions were divided. Some folks shook their heads, aligning themselves with Frank Dawson's grim predictions. Others, intrigued by Harold and Lily's progress, began to show cautious support. One Saturday morning, Lily and Dakota were deep into a practice session inside the ranch's cleared indoor arena when several trucks pulled into the yard. Harold stepped outside, wiping his hands on his jeans, surprised to see Henry Thompson and a group of local ranchers climbing out. "Morning, Harold," Henry called with a grin. "Heard your barn roof took a hit in that last storm." Harold blinked, caught off guard. "Didn't ask for help." "You didn't have to," another rancher said, already unloading tools. "That's not how we do things around here." Without further explanation, the men got to work. For hours, they patched the roof, reinforced fences, and broke ice from troughs, their actions louder than any words of support. Inside, Lily continued her work, occasionally leading Dakota to the big arena doors so visitors could catch a glimpse of their progress. By afternoon, the repairs were nearly finished. As the men prepared to leave, Henry pulled Harold aside. "Frank's been running his mouth in town," Henry said quietly, "telling folks you're exploiting that girl, that you're putting her in danger." Harold's jaw clenched. "That's complete nonsense." "We know that," Henry replied. "That's why we're here. Wanted to see for ourselves." He gestured toward the arena. Through the open doorway they watched Lily guide Dakota in a wide, perfect circle. The Mustang moved with grace, responding to cues so subtle they were almost invisible. Henry shook his head in admiration. "What that girl's doing, it's something special. Reminds me of the old ways, before we forgot the value of trust and started breaking horses instead of partnering with them." As February wore on, another challenge arose for Lily, this time at school. Her class had been assigned a project. Give a presentation on someone who inspires you. While most kids picked celebrities, sports icons, or musicians, Lily took a different route. She created a detailed poster all about wild Mustangs, their history, their survival, their spirit. Standing before her classmates, her voice trembled at first, but grew stronger with every word. "Mustangs aren't just horses," she said. "They're living history. Descendants of the horses brought by Spanish explorers, they've survived by being smart, strong, and free." Miss Wilson watched her with quiet pride. The girl who had once avoided eye contact and mumbled in class now stood tall, her voice clear. "Why do Mustangs inspire you, Lily?" she prompted gently. Lily's gaze was steady. "Because they teach us about resilience," she answered. "About how to survive loss and find new families. About learning to trust again, even when it's hard." The room fell into a hush. Every child in that classroom understood something deeper had been shared. When Lily finished, it was Emma Cooper who started clapping. The applause soon filled the room, even reaching Jake Williams, the boy who had teased Lily just weeks earlier. That afternoon, Lily brought the poster to the ranch. She unrolled it in front of Dakota, who curiously sniffed the images. "It's about your ancestors," she whispered. "About how special you are." From the barn doorway, Harold watched her, feeling something tighten in his chest. The child who had arrived, hollowed out by pain, was now blooming, finding healing, belonging, and strength in the most unexpected of places. As the festival drew near, all of Clearwater seemed to buzz with anticipation. It wasn't just about agriculture and horse competitions anymore. The town was waiting to see if Harold's infamous bet would come to pass. By early March, with the snow beginning to retreat and birdsong returning, Lily's training with Dakota had surpassed everyone's expectations. In the open paddock behind the barn, Dakota moved freely around her, untethered, responding to her body language and gestures. No ropes, no restraints, just understanding. At her soft cue, he turned. Another signal, and he trotted to her side. "Good boy," she murmured, running her hand down his strong, sleek neck. His once matted coat now gleamed with health, his eyes alive with trust. Harold, leaning against the fence, marvelled not just at the horse, but at the girl who had helped him change. "You're doing great," he called. "But remember, the festival's a whole different beast. There'll be noise, crowds." "I know," Lily nodded, focused. "We'll start practicing with distractions. Maybe Emma and her family could visit. Dr. Wilson mentioned some of his staff too." Harold nodded, silently impressed by her preparation. Over the past month, they'd developed a 10-minute routine. Not a show of dominance, but of partnership. No saddle, no bit, just trust. That evening, Martha arrived to pick Lily up, her expression unusually tight. "Harold, can we talk?" she asked. Once Lily was busy brushing Dakota down, Martha sat at Harold's kitchen table, laying out a stack of papers. "I've received an offer on my farmhouse," she said quietly, "from Frank Dawson." Harold's brows rose. "Frank? What's he up to?" "He says he wants to expand housing for seasonal workers. The offer's generous, more than the place is worth." She looked tired. "I might have to accept. The repairs, my pension, and Lily's college fund took a hit after the accident." "But the timing," Harold said, "it's too perfect." She nodded. "He wants us out in 10 days before the festival. He's trying to pull Lily out from under you." Harold's mouth tightened. "That's low, even for him. I haven't told Lily yet. She's so focused, I don't want to break her momentum." Then she asked the question Harold hadn't considered. "What happens to Dakota after all this?" "After the bet?" He was quiet. "I honestly don't know. He's not a working horse, but he's not a pet either." "Lily sees him as a partner," Martha said. "She's been researching conservation programs. She's got dreams, Harold." Harold nodded slowly. "She's got something special, that's for sure." Their conversation was interrupted when Lily came running in, her cheeks pink with excitement. "He did perfect lead changes today, and he responded to voice commands from 30 feet away." "That's amazing, sweetheart," Martha said, pulling on a smile. "Ready for dinner? I made stew." As they were about to leave, Harold touched Martha's arm. "Don't make any decisions yet. I may have an alternative." The next morning, he picked up the phone. "Jim," he said to Dr. Wilson, "I need some legal advice, and maybe some help with real estate." In the days that followed, the ranch became a small beacon of hope. More and more locals dropped by to watch Lily and Dakota train, bringing their children, their curiosity, and slowly their support. They watched, awestruck, as the Mustang bowed, trotted, circled, and stood by Lily's side without any restraint. "He's not afraid anymore," Lily explained to a group of onlookers. "We're not trying to control him. We're talking to each other, learning to trust." Emma's father turned to Harold, stunned. "That's different. A new kind of training." Harold smiled faintly. "Different than anything I've done in 50 years. That girl taught me something I didn't know I was still capable of learning." By the Sunday before the festival, Harold did something rare. He invited Martha and Lily to dinner. When they arrived, they found a warm meal, courtesy of Maria, and even Dr. Wilson and his wife Sarah seated comfortably in Harold's living room. "What's all this?" Martha asked, surprised. "Just thought we should talk about the future." Over dinner, laughter flowed. Stories were shared. Sarah praised Lily's growing confidence in class. Dr. Wilson marvelled at Dakota's transformation. Then, as coffee was poured, Harold grew serious. "Been thinking about what happens after the festival," he said. He slid a folder across the table. "Had these drawn up yesterday." Martha opened the documents, scanning them. Her face changed. First confusion, then disbelief. "Harold, this is—" "I'm serious," he said. "I can't run this place alone forever. Thinking about scaling down, shifting to training, but I need the right partners." Lily looked between them, confused. Martha handed her one of the papers. It was a simple diagram of the ranch, showing a section marked Palmer Residence. "He's offering us a home here," Martha explained, voice trembling, "in exchange for helping with a new training program." Lily's eyes lit up. "We'd live here? Near Dakota?" "That's the plan," Harold replied, his voice thick. "Your grandmother's got experience. You've got the gift. Together I think we can build something that matters." It was a breathtaking sight. From the edge of the shadowed forest, a small herd of wild mustangs had stepped cautiously into the open clearing, their movements slow and deliberate as they grazed under the soft golden light. Leading them was a striking black stallion, proud and watchful, his presence commanding. Harold's breath caught as he raised his binoculars, a quiet awe settling over him. "Dakota's original herd," he murmured, passing the binoculars to Lily. "Thunder's herd. They don't usually come this close to town." Lily took the binoculars, her eyes wide with wonder as she gazed at the majestic creatures moving like ghosts through the meadow. Her hand instinctively reached for Martha's, grounding herself in the moment. A soft question escaped her lips, barely more than a whisper. "Do you think they know?" she asked. "About Dakota? About everything that happened today?" Harold hesitated, then nodded slowly, surprising even himself. "Maybe," he replied, voice laced with quiet reverence. "Horses, they have a way of knowing things we can't explain." They stood in silence, watching the herd with unspoken respect. But as they watched, something intangible shifted in the space between them. It wasn't just admiration for the wild horses, it was something more, something deeper. In that moment, a quiet bond formed, a fragile sense of family, born not from blood, but from shared experience, from grief, from healing. Dakota had brought them together in a time of heartbreak, but what now held them close was something far more enduring. Mutual understanding, shared purpose, and the delicate, often painful, journey of rebuilding after profound loss. 1 month later, a new sign appeared at the entrance to Winter's ranch. Bold and proud, it read, "Winter's Palmer Natural Horsemanship, Building Partnerships Through Trust." And just below it, a smaller plaque had been mounted with care, home of the Susan Palmer Memorial Program for Mustang Preservation. The foreman's house, which had stood lifeless and quiet for years, now brimmed with warmth and renewed energy. The Palmer family had moved in, filling it with laughter, footsteps, and new memories. And in a special paddock near the house, Dakota had found a space that mirrored his soul, a quiet sanctuary where he could roam freely between shelter and the open pasture, choosing his path just as he always had. On a perfect spring evening, Harold sat on the wooden porch, coffee in hand, eyes fixed on the field. In the distance, he saw Lily, stronger now, steadier, gently introducing Dakota to a newly rescued Appaloosa mare, a timid creature who had come from a history of neglect and mistrust. There was something different about Lily now. The weight of her grief had not disappeared, but it had transformed. It had softened into compassion, hardened into purpose. Martha appeared beside him, offering a warm cup. "First class starts tomorrow," she said with a quiet smile. "Already got 8 students signed up." Harold let out a low whistle, shaking his head. "Never thought I'd see the day. People paying to learn the very thing I used to scoff at." Martha's gaze followed Lily. "Life's funny that way. Comes back around. Susan always said you'd come around too." He chuckled softly, the sound lined with a mixture of nostalgia and pride. "She was stubborn, that daughter of yours." "She had heart," Martha said, her voice tender, "and so does Lily." In the paddock, Lily had stepped aside, allowing Dakota to approach the nervous mare on his own terms. The Mustang moved with calm, deliberate grace, his presence gentle, non-threatening. He wasn't asserting dominance, he was offering trust. And in that silent communication, the frightened mare began to relax. It was a stunning transformation. A wild horse once feared and misunderstood, now serving as a guide, a teacher, not just for the mare, but for all who watched. "He's found his place," Harold said quietly, "and so has she." As the sun dipped behind the hills and painted the sky in strokes of amber and gold, Lily made her way back toward the porch, her cheeks flushed with triumph and joy. "She took the apple from my hand," she announced, pride in her voice. "Dakota showed her it was safe." "Quick learner," Harold nodded. "Reminds me of someone else." Lily smiled, accepting the praise with humility. These little moments, these tiny victories, had begun to stitch her broken pieces back together. The heavy grief that once shadowed her every step had slowly been replaced by something lighter. Not the absence of sorrow, but the presence of hope. She still missed her parents, every day. She still spoke to them in the quiet moments, still reached for their memory like a tether to who she was before. But alongside the pain had grown something new. Connection, purpose, family, reimagined and rebuilt. In the fading light, Dakota raised his head, ears perked, and gazed toward the distant northern hills, the place where his wild kin still roamed free. For a heartbeat, he stood utterly still, torn between two worlds, the one he came from and the one he had chosen. Then, with quiet dignity, he turned away from the hills and walked back toward the ranch, toward the people who had opened their hearts to him, toward the family that had formed not in comfort but in the crucible of shared pain and healing. Harold reached out, a little awkward, and placed a weathered hand on Lily's shoulder. "Your mother once told me," he said, voice rough with memory, "that some spirits aren't meant to be broken, just understood." He nodded toward Dakota. I guess she was right, about him and about a lot of other things. Lily leaned into his touch, tears shining in her eyes, but not falling. I think she'd be happy about all of this. I know she would, Martha added, her voice thick with emotion. And as the stars began to glimmer in the night sky above, the three generations, bound by loss, love, and the quiet miracle of a Mustang, sat together on the porch. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was full of memory, of gratitude, of life continuing. Below them, in the peaceful paddock, Dakota grazed quietly. Every so often, he lifted his head to check on his human family, making sure they were still near, still with him. He was no longer just a wild horse. He was something more now, a bridge between two worlds, a symbol of trust reborn, a heart still wild but at peace. The Mustang that no one could tame had found something far more powerful than submission. He had found home.